Hello, hello, and welcome to another week of Bible study. Today, we're going to be going into the story of Noah and the Ark. So I hope you guys are prepared and ready to go. Let's get it.
All right. So I'm going to take you guys on a little trip through the story of Noah, um, and hopefully kind of get a little deeper into the same story that we heard in Sunday school before. Um, I do want to touch, like, again, I'm not going to spend so much time because it is a couple chapters. Go from the ending of chapter 5 going into chapter 9, and even parts of chapter 10. So I don't want to take too much time to go and dissect every verse, but you're going to kind of see me jump a little bit from portion to portion, but I've put and indicated the important parts throughout the slides where the verses are. So like I said, as usual, if you have any questions, just let me know. Go ahead and chime in and we go from there. All right, let me get this presentation up. All right, so knowing the ark, and we start in chapter 6. Like I said, the ending of chapter 5. We'll take a quick gander to the ending of chapter 5, um, and we see the generations of mankind after Adam. And the reason why they highlight the generations because everything from here on out always has a meaning. It's not just to say, "Oh, this is what the genealogy was," and that's it. Everything that happens has a meaning. So we know about Enoch being the first person who was raptured up by God because he was so close to God. But what we fail to see sometimes is that Adam and Seth, being the first man and being Adam's son, were still alive when all these people were still being born. They lived so long that their lives were actually overlapping with each other. So, coming from the garden, being pushed out to this valley that God had prepared for them, the second garden, as you can say, here is where a lot of the descendants of Adam are now populating in the world. And a lot of them are leaving from this valley, but still staying in this valley. So it's always understood that wherever the second garden was on top of an elevated place, but underneath was the valley that now is kind of like a crater. It can take all the nourishment from the garden, from the waters and everything like that that falls from it. Um, But as we see when Noah is being born, 50 years, that's all that passed. Adam has already died and so has Seth. But it's only been a 50-year gap in between. Everybody else is still alive. So Enoch being the only person who wasn't alive only because, well, he was still alive. He didn't die death by man's standards, but was raptured. Everybody else was still there. So we have um, Enoch's son, Methuselah, which his name meant when he dies, judgment comes. He also died in the flood. And we have Lamech, who is his son, which his name means despairing. It's assumed that he died before the flood started. But yeah, so like I said, this is the reason why this chapter, being chapter 5, goes over the number of ages of everybody, how long they survived, when they had kids, so you can kind of know who was alive during when. Now, before we go to the next page, by the time we get to Enoch, Enoch did something very special that Seth and the rest of his descendants were very strict on. Seth being the new son after Cain killed Abel, Seth brought in a way of worship where they still sacrificed, but he gave his life to Christ. Now, this is the foundation that leads to religion. Religion hasn't started yet, but this leads to the foundation of it. So, as we know, when you're following a religion, you have the rules and precepts that kind of guide you on how to get closer to whoever you are serving. Here, they were just connecting with God because God was able to call out to them. So they walked with him. And following those precepts, Enoch walked so close with God, God said, you know what? I'm taking you up. I'm not even going to let you experience death. The way Seth was able to teach his descendants to praise and to trust in God and love him was a way of kind of correcting Cain and Adam and Eve's sin. So as soon as we get to Enoch, we understand that the whole family and his descendants all revere God, and there's not a day that's going to go by where they don't trust or don't believe or don't praise God. The issue that happens is after Enoch, we start to see that the generations are getting kind of tainted. Cain's descendants are starting to now interbreed with Enoch's descendants. So Methuselah has this very ominous name. Enoch had to ask God, can he name him this name? And God said, yes, name him this name, because it meant something. Where when he dies, judgment comes. Now, most people were frustrated when they heard Methuselah's name because they felt like, something weird was going to happen. They looked at him and was like, something weird's going to happen with you, your descendants, whatever happens, you're over there. You're a special case. Then he has his son Lamech. And a lot of people were like, yo, why would you name your son Lamech, meaning despairing? Like, that's what God told me to name my son. That's what I named him. And as we move forward, we move from Lamech naming his son Noah. Now, Noah's name means rest or peace or comfort through rest. Now, like I said, when Noah was born, it was a big thing that Adam and Seth had just died. Because it was believed that since those two patriarchs had already passed away, that could actually give them the knowledge from when the world started and what exactly happened in the garden, and kind of could tell them verbatim, Noah becomes the newest member of this race, of this family. And not only that, he is born albino, literally the first albino to ever survive. So a lot of people looked at him and thought he had a magnificent face because his face was white and his eyes shone like fiery sun. To them, they thought God had touched him and he was going to be the reason why everything would be fixed, primarily fixing the curse that Adam brought upon the world, or the penalty. But in reality, there is a secret message in the names from Adam all the way down to Noah. So Adam's name pretty much means man or first man. Seth means the appointed one. Enosh means just a mortal man. Kenan means sorrow. Mahalel means the blessed God. Jared means shall come down. Enoch means teaching or teacher. Methuselah, his death shall bring. Lamech, despairing. And Noah, comfort and rest. And the message to all the Hebrews, which they use as the second prophecy, reads like this: man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down teaching. His death shall bring the despairing comfort and rest. In Hebrew, it actually makes more sense, but it pretty much is the second foretelling of Jesus coming to fix the mistake of the garden. First prophecy we have is your son shall strike his head, he'll strike his heel, but he'll crush his head. That's the first one. This is actually the second prophecy right here, which is very sacred to everybody who reads the Torah. So anybody who is Jewish, they know this part. And that's the reason why this genealogy is sacred and has its own chapter. I'll give you guys a second if you guys are copying it down. All right, moving on. So, the world in his day. At this time, Cain's descendants, if you remember back to the other Bible study when Cain left, he started a city in the land of Nod. And his descendants became very wicked because they were dealing with the fallen angels. They started to learn how to make tools of war. They also made tools of music and things of that nature. But it was because they started to exalt themselves so much that instead of dedicating themselves to worship or anything like that, Cain's descendants were lost. But they started to now entice Seth's descendants. Now, Seth's descendants, not to say they're all perfect, but they all had devoted their lives to Christ, or not Christ, but to God and the servitude of God. But once they heard the music and seeing what they were doing out in the streets, they wanted to go party as opposed to worship, sacrifice, and do work to show God that they're repenting for everything that Adam and Eve did. Again, I put in here another note about the whole religion concept because this is where the need for religion starts to arise. It was understood because Adam and Seth were there to tell their descendants, no, this is what you need to do. Follow this. It was pretty much just like a cultural thing. It was a cultural thing to celebrate God, to give a sacrifice, and to respect God in that manner. But now we're starting to see the difference where it's no longer just a cultural thing because now it's getting mixed with Cain's culture. This culture of being wild, partying, doing whatever you felt like doing because there was no consequence. And they start separating from God. So now, to give you back this image of when Adam and Eve were able to walk with God in the garden, be face to face, Cain and Abel had to see him through some lenses, like far away. They had to yell to see God, or God actually had to travel to come and see them. Then you have the next generation and so on. So pretty much after Seth, all his generations, for them, they could only, in a sense, FaceTime God. That connection was getting thinner between God and man. But as this is starting to go on before Noah, the connection between man and God is now a phone call, and no longer just any phone call, a scratchy phone call with no good reception. So God is separating himself away, and he's getting so upset because of what's going on. So as he starts to see that all of Seth's descendants are starting to get corrupted, because not only are they having kids with Cain's descendants, all the families are getting mixed. So what he had intended to keep separate is now coming back together. Eventually, it would wipe out all of Seth's descendants, and all of them would be mixed. So the concept of religion starts here. And it starts to now be the reason why people have to use religion to guide themselves, to keep themselves whenever they do make a mistake, to give them the precepts of, when you make a mistake, this is what you do. When you mess up, this is what you do. It's no longer just a cultural thing, because there's other people now coming into our culture.
Can I ask a question? And
yes, sir.
this may be a little bit abstract, or by abstract I mean like not based in the Bible. But my question is, what is the difference like between culture and religion, aside from maybe just like the literal fact that maybe religion can be traced back to a book? Um, but is there are there some key
Yes.
symptoms that might help me distinguish it?
Yes, of course. Um, to better answer that, so whenever we look at cultural, you're always going to see a way of life that is not impeded by a creator or other people. This is just the way it is. So, perfect example, our family being Haitian. Whenever you come inside of a Haitian household, you give a kiss on the cheek to say hi. Okay. That's just part of the culture. Now, you can see that in the religion, but in the religion, it's more like a rule. It's not a way of life where hey, you came into my house and you didn't say hi or announce yourself by giving a kiss on the cheek. It's looked at disrespectful. Whereas in a religion, it's like you messed up. Now you have to do this or that to kind of clean up your mistake.
Mm,
So that's kind of where you can kind of look at both. In a way of life, it's more relaxed. It's just natural for you to do that. It's either you do it or you don't. But in a religion, you have a set guideline of set rules that you have to follow. And if you mess up, this is the consequence, or this is how you make up for it.
okay, that makes sense. Like may versus must, or should
Exactly.
versus shall.
Yes. Perfect. That's a perfect way of putting it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So this is what's going on right there. So now when we look at chapter 5, verse 29, before we get into the main meat being chapter 6, we see that when they're naming each other and they're talking about the name of Noah, there is a severe drought in this valley. So away from where Adam and Eve were taken to after the garden, and away from where the rest of the descendants started to live, they live in a whole other place, kind of separated from Adam and Eve, just because they wanted to get away from Cain's descendants. And in this valley, because of Cain and his descendants doing so much evil in the world, God caused a severe drought to hit the whole entire world. Now, with Noah's name being comfort and peace, that is the reason why it was saying that Noah now is going to be the person to fix this. His life will bring something that will now bring some repass and some relief to us in this struggle. All right. So quick timeout. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. We see that God is beyond disappointed with his creation. All right. Now, quick sidebar. Usually we would read the verses or the chapters before we start, but because there's so many verses to go over, we got a couple chapters, about 4 chapters to go over for this Bible study. We're just kind of going to refer to it. So if you want to, you can write down the verses that I highlighted so you can go read it for yourself afterwards. But yes, so back to this little timeout section. In chapter 6, verses 1 to 8, we see that God is, again, disappointed with his creation. After Adam and Eve messed up, after Cain killed Abel, and he's like, I thought I kind of fixed that with Seth, and you guys are still messing up. Not only that, here goes the descendants who are descendants of Cain and Seth's descendants who are now having kids together. Their daughters are sleeping with the fallen angels that are walking the earth. The ones that God kicked out, they're sleeping and lusting after these angels. And the kids that they were having, or their offspring, were these spiritless beings called the Nephilim. And they were considered giants. And if you take a gander into Greek mythology and Roman mythology, these are the creatures that they were worshiping. So when you look at the hierarchy in the Greek mythology and their whole kind of Rolodex of how they categorize from Zeus all the way down to all their demigods, when you see the Cyclops, the giants, and all these other beasts, they're the offsprings of these fallen angels and the women. Now, one of the punishments for the women who slept with these fallen angels, they became sirens, as we would later on know them as mermaids that sing, and they just lure more people to sin. This is how bad mankind was becoming because they were intermingling with these fallen angels that God never wanted them to deal with. So God said, all right, at this point, instead of letting you guys live these long, drawn out lives, after this next generation, nobody's living past 120 years old. Everybody else who's already here, y'all can finish out your lives, but from here on out, the next generation that come after y'all, it's 120 years. I'm limiting y'all. So within, he said, I'm going to go ahead and blot out all this creation because y'all didn't deserve to have this. This is a beautiful place, and you guys are still messing it up. So to kill off all the creations that the fallen angels are making and all the sin that's happening on the earth, and to kind of wipe away Cain's mistake, he said, I'm going to destroy it all and start all over. But as he was looking, there was only one faithful man from Enoch's descendants. And he said, because of Enoch and because of his descendants that still kept me relevant in their life, Noah finds favor in my eyes. And because of him being a righteous man, I will make him Adam 2.0 pretty much. He will become the next Adam, the next start, and recreate creation. So Noah being the chosen one in chapter 6, verse 8, and also chapter 6, verse 13, we see God choose him because he was a righteous follower. He literally comes to him and tells him, hey, look, I pick you. Now, Noah, knowing who God is, even though we would look at God as saying, Father God, Jesus, whatever, and we'll pray, they were able to talk to God in a way that we still will never be able to do. The connection to them, like I said, was like a phone conversation now that was still shaky. We have to try our best to hear a whisper nowadays with the way that the world is, to see if we can even just hear God's voice. And even then, it's still hard. So God talks to Noah and has this conversation with him. And he tells him about how bad the world has become, my bad. And as he's having this conversation with Noah, he tells Noah, hey, look, I'm going to put an end to it, so I need you to prepare yourself. Now, ask yourself this. If God was to have a conversation with you and tell you everything that you know and love is going to end, so you need to prepare yourself, what's the first thing you're going to do?
I personally would probably tell someone.
And that's exactly what Noah did.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. Stefan, go ahead.
Well, you're saying if we were Noah, or if God's telling us right now, are we in which point of view is it?
No, I'm saying if you were in Noah's shoes, what would you do?
Oh yeah. Like Chris said, tell someone.
And just to show you just how, common we are with Noah, and just how, familiar he is as a human, he's not a special person. He literally did the same thing that you guys just said. He went to go tell everybody. But of course, everybody told him he was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So as God is telling him, I'm going to, put an end to it, when Noah asks God how, and he tells him, that's what makes everybody look at him and say, you're crazy, because there is no way that you could finish everybody like that. Chris, you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
I have a question. Just if I was in this time, and just living in, I don't know what year this is, but if I'm living this time, and I don't know, I got to understand all the what is like? Because you said there's no religion at this point because it hasn't been. It's just God, and so like if Noah came up, if I'm there at this moment and told me what God told him, and everybody thinks he's crazy, um I mean it's hard to say like what I would think, but I would, mass majority, I could see how everybody would say he's crazy and just make. I don't know. I've heard stories like people make. I don't know. People were making like his kids. People were like joking about it and saying, it's crazy, and family members and stuff like that were hearing it. But that was my question. I just like, I guess what the understanding of why they're calling him crazy and just the setting of when this took place.
Okay, not a bad question.
That kind of it wasn't like it was more of me thinking out loud on a question.
Nothing wrong with
that.
Nothing wrong with that.
I think it's interesting how God will impart certain knowledge or wisdom on us, and not the majority. He typically only, calls or gives a message to the minority, knowing that it will not be easy to remain obedient because he didn't share it with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so in life, we typically are taught to, be in community and, whatever the majority is doing. I mean, think about elections right now. It's the popular vote, the majority. Whatever the majority wants is what's right. And so, but God comes along and he says, I have a secret for you. This is going to happen and you need to do this. And it goes against what everybody else is saying, but we're expected to remain obedient and know that following him is what's right.
And I think both you and Stefan really hit it on the head, because to have God really talk to one person and for everybody to even believe, think about today, if you hear something from someone and they tell you, hey, look, that's the fact, that's the truth. And just piggybacking off of what Chris said with politics and the elections. Somebody tells you a fact about Kamala or Trump, and you go tell the next person, you got to fact check it. You got to do all this stuff just to believe one thing. But if you go around running around saying, no, this is the truth, this is the truth, where is there, what are your credentials to really prove or really validate your claims to say, hey, yeah, they're right, or I can trust them? And what that actually brings up is the notion of faith. This is when we actually start to see God testing the faith of mankind right here. He told one person who didn't have the same experience as Adam and Seth, but he's heard about it through his family members. And now God talks to him and says, okay, unlike everybody else in your family that had the opportunity to talk straight to face to Adam and Seth, I'm telling you, will you believe me? And instead of trusting the world like everybody else when he told them, he said, I believe you, and I'll do that. And we start to see how God now takes Noah and makes him the second Adam. And this is just to show you what happens when we actually have faith. And God tells you something. He gives you a plan or a vision. It's for you. And even if you share it with the world, don't expect the world to always believe you. They'll ridicule you. They'll mock you. They'll make fun of you and think that you're crazy for what you're doing. But when that day comes, as we'll see in Noah's story, when that day comes and that water comes, that flood comes, and what he said was going to happen comes through to pass, everybody's going to say, hey, bring me with you. Hey, let me on that ship. Hey, I need help. I don't want to drown out here. But it's too late. Faith will carry you and let you float on different waters and different floods that were intended to crush others, but was intended to protect you. That's what faith protects and brings us to. And this is probably the first story of faith in the Bible that we get to see that God is now taking somebody who didn't get to see him face to face or wasn't part of creation or seen all this grandiose things and says, hey, just trust me. And you have either one or the other option to use the free will he gave you to either trust or not trust. So moving forward, God tells Noah, yeah, BJ, what's your question?
It's not a question, really. It's just a statement. Because just to touch back on the faith part, um, I think we can all say like how hard faith is, having faith is, but it's what's one of the most rewarding things, you know, you can have. Like you said, people want to fact check and people want to be like, hey, this and this, but it's like that confidence you have when people doubt it, but God gave you that promise or God gave you that word. So, I just wanted to, share that and just say like, how it's one of the most rewarding things when you have that faith and God comes through for you when people don't believe what God has given you or what God has told you. So that's my little 2 cents, that's my bad. Go ahead. My bad.
No. Bro, this is what it's for. This is Bible study right here.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
We're studying a story, but the story applies to us. Like literally take out Noah's name and put BJ chosen, put Jamar chosen, put Stefan chosen, put Chris chosen. Doesn't matter who. This is the whole thing of faith. This is what it is about faith. God is asking us, hey, if I tell you, if I show you this, if I just give you a glimpse of what's to come, are you going to follow and do what I asked you to do? And this is an everyday thing for us. How many times have we skipped out on what God has asked us for? Where he told us to prepare and get ready, kind of prepare ourselves up for a flood that is coming, a storm that's coming. And we've got drowned out in that storm because we didn't pay attention or we didn't believe or we didn't think that it was going to bother or affect us. This is an everyday thing. If it's not happening to you, it can happen to somebody in your family, somebody in your household, which is the reason why we have no choice but to share it. But this is how it starts. All it takes is God to have that one person. And all you got to do is have faith. But moving on. So now we have the continuation of this conversation between Noah and God. God instructs Noah on how to prepare this ark from wood and what dimensions and everything that it should be. So tells him he needs somewhere, because it's cubits is what they're using in the Bible, but to convert it to what we have today for our measurements is about 450 to 510 feet long of a ship. You need 75 to 85 feet long. That's supposed to be wide. Dang, I made a couple of typos. My bad, you guys. 75 to 85 feet wide and 45 to 51 feet high. It needs to be covered with tar, which is considered pitch is considered tar, inside and out on all the little crevices, so that way no water could seep in or seep out. And everything was to be built out of gopher wood, which is a very durable type of wood. Yes.
Is that like in the NIV version? That's the Bible I have since like I was a kid. My parents got me, but it says is that the same as cipher wood? That's what it just says in this Bible at the same kind. Because I was just interested to see the kind of like wood. I guess is I would assume. I mean, wood's durable anyway, but like for this ark, is it like a certain type of wood that's just, I guess, stronger or more like withstand like flood waters and rain and stuff?
So the closest thing that we have for gopher wood would be it's a type of tree called the Florida torreya, and that tree is what was very durable, very durable, and that was the most durable thing that they could use back then. But a lot of the ships that were done in the colonial days were still used with the same type of wood. So
Okay.
it's, yeah, it has a couple different names for what gopher wood is, but there it's a very, they call it teak sometimes, but the wood itself goes through this process where they soak it in water, salt, and oil to make it more durable, to make it waterproof, and to kind of make it float. So when you use it to build out of, it does more work for you. I think that should answer your question. Or another one that you might know, cypress wood or cypress trees.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so everything was to be built out of gopher wood. Noah's response is what is actually kind of crazy to me. He heard God and he followed his instructions all the way to a T. It actually took him 120 years to make the ark, and not by himself, but with the help of his 3 sons. Nobody else. Amidst the persecution, the mocking, the making fun of, people calling him crazy, he did his work for 120 years and didn't stop. I think what is the craziest thing out of all of it is Noah, in this, mind you, was in a drought. He's never seen a flood, let alone a shower. He's never even seen the sea. So for you to tell somebody who's never seen a body of water, and if it rains, it's a little shower because they're in a drought, you're telling me that I'm going to see a body of water that's not only going to cover my city, but it's going to cover the world. My imagination wouldn't even be able to comprehend that. We know what a flood looks like because we see an ocean, we've seen floods on movies, we've seen floods everywhere. But if you've never seen it before, what would you be preparing for? You see what I'm saying? You have some water in a pond or in a river, but you don't have any indication of just how big a flood would be. But even then, Noah still stood steadfast and said, I'm going to build this. This is 120 years building for something he has yet to ever see in his lifetime. Because since he's been born, that drought has been there. And again, he has not seen a body of water like the sea before, let alone to know what a boat is and how it's supposed to operate on this sea. So again, through blind faith, he's letting God lead him, and he's following and doing exactly what he's asking him to do. And like I said, if that's not an example of faith on what's going on, I don't know what else is.
I think that's a great point. If I might add to what you were saying, Henley, I think it's easy to think about what Noah did from like a much larger on a much larger scale, or saying like, building an ark is for 120 years is crazy. It doesn't really translate to anything we go through, in this day and age. But I think it is, the first thing that came to mind for me was, have you ever felt like you've been called to do something that your family's never done, or that your parents have never done, or that your friends have never done, and that you may not have seen before, and it takes a lot of faith to see it through. And so I'm sure everybody here can relate to maybe taking on a task or a skill, pursuing a skill set, that you were kind of the only person in your circle that um, knew anything about it, and it may have taken a little bit more grit or faith to kind of remain committed to it, because you don't have a blueprint other than just the idea or the seed.
No, that's exactly what it is. Like I said, I reading the story and really from last week, getting prepared for this week, I kept going over the fact of this foundation. So as you guys know, we have the foundation in Kersey's name. Jamar, you can go ahead. After I finish this point, you can go ahead and talk. I start realizing that again, when you're following whatever God has put on your heart, that vision that He gives you, and He tells you to go, sometimes you don't know what you're walking into, but everything He gives you is going to work smoothly. Before you even know it, you look back and you realize I already built this up. I already built an ark. He already gave me the blueprint. I followed it the way He told me to, and I'm looking at it, and it looks perfectly fine. I don't know how else it's supposed to look. I just know what He told me to make, and that's it. He said it's going to work. I believe Him to work, and let's roll with it. And I look at that as a very big motivator for me, because there's a lot of projects that I'm taking on right now, and honestly, I don't know. I think, Chris, I've had this conversation with you before. Sometimes I'm looking at some of these things as being a leader, and I don't know what it looks like on the other side. And BJ can tell you guys that a lot. I had this conversation with him probably a couple hours ago. Sometimes I'm struggling, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. But when you look back at all the work that's been done, and you realize we haven't been working for 120 years, but you look at whatever you've done in the last couple months, last couple days, last couple years, and you realize it's worked. I'm gonna let Jamar go, and then BJ, you can go.
I was just gonna say, really just like hearing it from, I guess, from a child, like everyone had heard it, as a child, and hearing it now, it does tell a really different story, about having faith and really just having. It's just interesting to me to see that he started off with faith. He had faith throughout the 120 years, because the 120 years is, I don't be honest, I didn't know that part. I didn't know it was that long. And just seeing that he was able to have faith the whole time, and see it through, that is something that we do go through every day, and we struggle with every day, with having faith with things that, like you said, that we pursue, like college. Like, I mean, I started college, and I promise you, there was a time where I just did not, like you said, I didn't think I was gonna make it through. But I mean, if you do have the faith and you do just see it through, I mean, he's always with you. So it is kind of interesting to see this story from a point of view, read it as an adult.
Yes, sir. BJ, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on the last part you said too about leadership. Like that part right there is the big one too, because sometimes you don't know like how leadership may may be. Like we all know, we all see it, but we don't know how it actually, how it feels, or how it's like going through that process. Like we'd be like, oh, this person's a leader, oh, this person's a leader. We see it, but it's like when you get put in that position to be a leader, and that's what I mean. Like you said, me and you talk about this all the time. You know my situation with my life and what's been going on. So there's things where I'm like, I still don't know how to be a leader, but I've been there's moments in our life where God has formed us and molded us into leadership. We don't even think we know, but he's put us in that position before. We just don't realize it until we actually sit down and been like, okay, I've been through this before, but I actually didn't know I was going through this before. So that part is big right there, leadership.
And that's why I said it's Bible study is essential if you say you want to have a walk with God, because you start to see that a lot of the things that we've learned when we were kids, there's a deeper meaning to it. And God shows different versions and different facets of these stories that really can help you in your everyday life. And people just write them off as, oh, just children's stories or Sunday school stories. And they're a lot more meaningful than that. BJ, you have another question?
No, I don't. I think I pushed it
Oh,
by mistake. No,
no
I'm good.
problem. All right. Moving forward. Uh-oh. Hold on. I think my computer froze. Okay, there we go. All right. So continuing on with the instructions, as we know from Sunday school, we remember bringing the 2 pairs of each animal, male and female, and bringing them into the ark. But in chapter 7, 1 through 5, we start to see that it was actually 7 pairs. Yes, Jamar.
I meant to ask this a while back because you were talking about how God actually spoke to someone else other than Noah and let him know about the flood as well. Is there anywhere to find more about that? All this stuff.
If you would go to a Hebrew Bible, you would kind of actually start to see in their text, like I said, with the way that the names are, it's always been kind of hinted at that something was going to happen. God has been communicating with the descendants of Enoch that there's going to be a great disaster or a great blotting out of sin in the future. So that was the reason why they named themselves accordingly to tell their future generations. God had already told us about this. God had already prepared this. But the followers and the descendants of Adam and Seth started to follow after Cain and his descendants and started not listening to what was already being prepared for them. Had they all followed, that ark could have been bigger, or there probably would have never been a flood, and they probably could have found another way to separate, let alone let God just deal with Cain and his descendants as opposed to all of them all together. Make sense?
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. But yeah, so back to the story. When we get to chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, we see that God is telling Noah, because in chapter 6, he tells him, bring 2 pairs of all the animals. And that's usually what they tell us in Sunday school. But in chapter 7, he actually goes a little deeper and he says, no. And these 7 pairs of all clean animals and 1 pair of all the unclean animals. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Henley, I thought the unclean and the clean animal things doesn't come till the Hebrew culture starts and the religion actually starts to now specify what is clean and what is unclean. We got to remember, this story that is written of Noah's life was written by Moses. Moses is already in the Jewish culture. He is already a Hebrew child who now, as a Hebrew child, he is following the rules that God has given him on the 10 Commandments and the rules of like the Passover and things of that nature. So when it would come to animals, there's certain animals that they didn't eat, and there's certain animals that they did eat, and how you have to prepare these animals. You couldn't eat the blood, so even eating your steak a certain way you couldn't do. You see what I'm saying? So as he writes this and he says that, it's more of an indication of the culture bleeding into the story. And it's when you start to see man is not perfect. Even the books of the Bible, as you start to understand the word and you understand Moses, you start to see how his personal touch on these stories kind of lead in a sense of plot holes. You start to see that he added something that would have never actually been there. It would have just been God telling Noah, hey, bring 7 pairs of those animals and then 1 pair of those animals right there. But it wouldn't necessarily be clean and unclean to them. It would have just been, these are the animals he wants me to put on the ship. Which is why in chapter 6, it goes one way and the tone changes in chapter 7. And again, this is just to show you guys the differences in the writing style. Each writing style actually means a different way that God is dealing with people. So chapter 6, God is talking to Moses in a kind of like uplifting way, like, don't worry, I got you. But chapter 7, God is in like an authoritative way, like, you need to do this. This is what I need you to do. Don't mess up. And this is how we kind of get the distinction of how he wanted everybody to proceed when it came to the ark. Another question I get asked when people ask me about Noah the ark is, how did they eat? In chapter 6, verse 21, he told them to store up as much food as he can get his hands on. Every dry flour, dough, anything that wouldn't necessarily dry out and die or get spoiled, store it up. get it together, bind it, put it down, bring it onto the ship. All your seeds that you can get, bring it onto the ship. And because it was gopher wood, or the type of wood that they were using, they could scrape the inside of it and make compost with it. So they were able to pretty much plant trees on the ark. So the seeds, meaning that they could make fruits and things of that nature. So as you realize in Noah's story, we start to see that Noah pretty much becomes in a sense, a vegetarian. Not by choice, but because that's what they have access to, and they can't really eat the animals that are on the ship. But whatever food they have brought with them, if it's already meat, then they would possibly already eat that from before. There's only 8 people on the ark, which was, and because nobody else would listen or believe or even repent their ways. So you got Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. So 8 altogether. Like God told Noah, the day of the flood came, and that's in chapter 7, verses 4. This part of the story shows the magnitude of faith, as we've been talking already, of Noah that he had for God. Because again, man who's never even seen a rain shower believed the impossible, and it happened. As some would say, it's only crazy until it happens. So, going on back to the story, 40 days and 40 nights. As you get from this story on to the rest of the Bible, there's going to be certain numbers that continue to show themselves in the Bible. Numbers like 3, 7, 12, 40, 120, 144. You can see those numbers. You can see them in multiples. You can see them repeating. So you might see 777. You might see 100 or 144,400, and that's that. You're going to see these numbers a lot more. And these are the cardinal numbers of God's. And there's still a couple more numbers, but these are just a couple examples. These numbers are what the Jews in the Hebrew culture would call numbers of perfection. When they make their shapes, or if they have their holidays and they use these numbers always tend to come back to their starting point. And that's why they call them numbers of completion. Every time God has a promise or a prophecy or does something with somebody, these numbers always come up because these numbers always make completion. No matter how you turn it, no matter how the prophecy is changed, somehow, some way, these numbers end up creating or finishing a promise or a prophecy. So, for example, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, 3 in 1. 7 is what you refer to as God's favorite number because it's the number of creation, 7 days. It's the number of perfection, 7 days to make anything perfect. And even if you're fasting, 7 days is the ideal number of days for fasting for your body to actually get a soft reset. So when we look at the number 7, magical things happen with these numbers in our lives. So then you have the 12 disciples, 40 days and 40 nights. 144 is supposed to be for the followers in Revelations that are supposed to be the people that go up to heaven at the end of the day. 120 is also the multitude of people that come by the thousands to hear God's message. All these numbers, and plus some more, are always what God uses to show his hand in his work. If those numbers are not there, most of the time it's not God. And this is a way that he kind of shows what he has going on. So back to Noah. Noah and his family were on the ark while it rained for 40 days and 40 nights exactly. Okay? It's literally stopped right after that. But they still carried on with their life on the ark. Noah was 600 years old when he got on the ark. So if you take back, Noah was reaching 400 years old to work on a project for 120 years. A lot of us can't do anything for more than 5 minutes without getting distracted and wanting to, I'm tired. So I put this little note in there to kind of give you guys another push and another emphasis on laziness when it comes to faith. If Noah could do this without knowing what was going to be the outcome, why can't we go for 5 minutes? Why can't we go for another day? Why can't we go for another week? Let's work on that project. Let's work on that vision, that whatever God has given you, devote yourself to it and push yourself. Noah was a human just like you. Wasn't nothing more special. And he was able to do it for a lot longer than me and you would actually be able to do it. We would even be able to survive 120 years. It's still building an ark of that magnitude. None of us have degrees for it. None of us know anything about carpentry, architecture, engineering, structural engineering. We wouldn't be able to do it. So let that be some encouragement for you guys to continue to push forward when God gives you something to do. After the flood, after the 40 days and 40 nights, everything on earth was wiped out except for those on the ark. There was a soft reset. In the Hebrew Bible, they start calling Noah now the second Adam, the second created man. After the 40 days and 40 nights, it took the water 150 days to dry out. That's chapter 7, verse 24. It took it 150 days just to start, not completely dry out, but to start drying up, to start receding, so you can start seeing land again. All right. So around this time, 7 months after the flood started, okay, 150 days is about 5 months. And another 2 months is when it actually is starting to get dry around the whole world. Okay. Noah and his family landed on Mount Ararat. All right. And after 40 days of sitting there on top of this mountain, mind you, this is just more time going past this 150 days, the 7-month mark. 40 days again, as Noah's finally sitting there, he's like, okay, we might have some dry land. Just to kind of give you a little more emphasis, they can't necessarily see outside the ship. It's covered and blocked. So inside is all they see. They don't see no sunlight. They don't see nothing else. They just see inside the ship, and that's it. And Noah opens a little window. He takes off the tar and opens up the window, and he sends out a raven to see if it can find some dry land. It flew back and forth for days and couldn't find anything. So he said, okay, boom, I don't trust the raven. Let me go send out a dove. And when he sent out the dove, it returned with nothing in hand, but it came straight back to the ship, unlike the raven did. So Noah said, okay, no problem. There's still water everywhere. So he waited 7 more days. And now he sent the dove back out to go look for land. But this time the dove came back with an olive tree leaf in its mouth. Now, if anybody understands about the olive tree leaf with Christianity, this is where the symbol comes from. This is the reason why whenever you see it, you always see a white dove with an olive tree branch or the leaf. This was a symbol of promise. When the storm is over, the peace that you get from the olive tree branch and the dove, it's like the peace is coming to you. This is where that symbol comes from. When God promises something to you and the promise is made whole, the olive leaf is the symbol of saying, yes, you finally made it. You always hear stories of people who see a white dove after they finish getting to their quote unquote promised land, or they finally finish their goal or their dream or their aspirations. They see a dove flying by them, or olive leaves or olive branches in front of them. This is where that symbol comes from. Even though he got this olive tree branch or leaf, he still waited 7 more days on top of that. He sent out the dove again, And it didn't return because now it had somewhere to actually sit. It had somewhere to perch. At this point, God or no one knew it was time to leave the ark. When God finally said, "Hey, Noah, it's time to leave," we're in chapter 8, verse 16. And he said, "Yeah, go ahead. Everybody who's on the ark, go ahead and lead them all out. We're going to start this all over again." So now we come to the covenant. God makes a covenant with Noah after he comes out of the ark. Now, this is the first formal covenant between God and someone after Adam. There's a technical covenant with Adam when he tells them to multiply on the earth, but the reason why it doesn't count is because it was a penalty for them because they messed up. This is the first time God makes a promise with somebody and it's not out of sin. And we'll start to see more covenants, but notice the covenants come after a great deal of faith. God usually makes a promise with somebody after they show their faith to God and actually listen and follow through. So what is a covenant? A covenant is a promise, an agreement, or a contract between two or more parties. For a covenant to work, you need three things. You need a symbol, you need the people or groups who the agreement is between, and you need a sign that will last and show future generations what the covenant means, so that way nobody will forget what it is. So, and you'll see this no matter in what story we go, no matter what story we come from this point forward, whenever God makes a covenant, these three things will always be there. So God makes a covenant with Noah. And how it starts, Noah builds an altar and sacrifices on it and praises God for bringing them through the whole flood. That's the symbol. Now, God, smelling the pleasing aroma, promised to never curse the ground again because mankind will always sin, which is talking about the drought. And he says, neither will I flood the earth again. While life exists, everything that is created will continue the way he created it, meaning the sun will still come up and shine. The seasons will still go on. Time will still move perfectly fine. Nothing will stop. Everything will still continue the same way that it has. And the third part of that covenant, which is the sign, is the rainbow. The rainbow, and we've known this from Sunday school, the rainbow was the sign that whenever it rains, or if it rains heavy like a big storm, every time you see a rainbow, that is the promise that God says, I see it and you see it on both ends, from the heavens and from the ground, that I'll never break this promise. As long as these rainbows keep forming, I will always remember not to break my promise that I made to Noah. Stefan, go ahead.
Yeah. So like you said, we do in Sunday school, going over this, and my question is about like the rainbow. So that's where, because I I don't know if I wasn't listening, that I didn't realize that until I read it again as an adult. Like, so the rainbow after the rain, every time it rains, the rainbow comes. That's been since when God said that. That's why the rainbow shows, or I know it's science and the deflection of the water particles in the sun, things like that. But like that's what that's supposed to signify when every time after it rains. Wow. Okay.
So now and this is why it's so hard to kind of tell people to get away from science when it comes to God, is because, again, just because something has a physical presence or a physical manifestation, that's in this realm. But the spiritual realm sits side by side with the physical realm. As you know, anything you do in the spiritual realm gets compounded in the physical realm, meaning if I move a bottle on a table in the spiritual realm, in the physical realm, it's going to look like it's moving by itself. Some people call it magic. Some people say mystics or voodoo or whatever. But in reality, whatever you do in the spiritual realm gets compounded in the physical realm. And not to lose you too much, but this is the reason why when people always say there's always a consequence spiritually for every physical thing that you do, because the same way that everything in the spiritual realm gets compounded in the physical, the same is true for the opposite. everything in the physical also gets compounded in the spiritual, which is why they say whenever you're having a spiritual attack, you can't deal with it on the physical side. You have to go in spiritual. So if you don't pray, you're not going to be able to stop that spiritual attack. If somebody is fighting you a physical battle, you have to be able to defend yourself physically. You see what I'm saying? So each one warrants their own thing. So physically, we can describe a rainbow of what it is. It's reflection of light through the water particles, whatever. That's what science tells you. But spiritually, that rainbow is a sign that now when God sees it from the heavens and when we see it on earth, that is that promise being reaffirmed every single time it's a heavy rain or another little mini flood or whatever, a typhoon, hurricane. Every single time that rainbow starts, God says, hey, look, even though this storm got out of hand or the storm is there and it's getting crazy, I'm never going to destroy the world like I did in Noah's time.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. And like it just ties in. I mean, not to go left field because I don't want to go get. It's like a whole nother can of worms with what I'm about to say. But I'm a big like I wouldn't say conspiracy theorist. I'd say more so truth seeker. And so like this whole pride, LGBTQ, whatever the acronym is, plus like their symbol or their whole like what they identify with, it's like a religion, is the rainbow. So like and people try and mock Jesus and mock God in different ways. So now fully understanding, I feel like I wouldn't say that's it's a stretch with what they're doing, but I feel like it's a connection with it because it's going against with what God is saying and with in the Bible, and they're using this rainbow as their symbol as a reference. But
I'm actually glad you said that because there was something I was debating if I wanted to put in the Bible study.
Nah, bro,
because
it's crazy.
I'm gonna say this: when it comes to the LGBT community and the sign of the rainbow, now there's plenty of theories out there, but now the one that I'm going to focus on is this one. When the devil wants to use something to blaspheme God or to make fun of God and to make fun of his followers, he's always going to take exactly that symbol, that thing that God has used to connect to his people, to turn it and pervert it. Okay? Now, why did he destroy the earth in the first place with the flood? Because of all the wickedness and the sin that these people were doing. They were having sex with angels. Jamar, go ahead.
Actually, this is a question for Maya. She was actually asking, so did Sodom and Gomorrah happen after this?
Oh yes, and we're
Okay,
gonna get
because
to
she
that.
was just
Yes.
asking because if after the covenant, I know he does still, rain down fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. So I just wanted to know about that. That's all.
We will get to Sodom and Gomorrah soon in a couple
Mhm.
weeks, but just to kind of give you a peek at that as well. And Stefan, I'm gonna go back to what we were just saying, but just to give you a peek into that in the future, what God does with Sodom and Gomorrah is actually an answer to the question: does God have a problem with homosexuality and the LGBTQ community as a whole? And his response to it is he brings down fire and brimstone on that city. Now, the reason why that's important, and again, I'll go over this later on in that study in the future. The reason why that's important is because before we have traditional cleaning products like Windex and Clorox, the way to actually chemically clean something is to put brimstone and sulfur on it and burn it with a fire. Yes.
My bad. Last question. It's about that too. So, with Sodom and Gomorrah, I probably should ask you this afterwards, but with Sodom and Gomorrah, was it still people people associating with fallen angels, or was it more just the homosexuality?
It was actually all of it. So
All
there
of it.
wasn't no fallen angels in that sense. What it
Okay.
was, they took God's messengers who were angels, and they said they wanted to do perverted things with those messengers of God, which God took offense to. And he
Okay.
said,
Okay.
you guys are no different than the people before the flood. because you're doing everything that they were doing in this city. You guys are sleeping with kids. You guys are sleeping with each other, having orgies, doing everything that I have not ordained you guys to do. So, like I said, before there was the modern day cleaning products, to clean something chemically, you need to pour sulfur and brimstone on it and burn it. That's how you would chemically clean something. Yes, Christopher.
That raises a point slash question. I guess it's a conditional question. Is at the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, had the Bible been written? And if not, well, I'll let you answer first. Is had the Bible been created yet, or were people teaching about God and telling the story of Noah, or were we still in a time where people were not preaching the gospel?
So it's a little bit of both. The gospel itself, like I said, religion has not taken place yet. So there are scrolls, but mostly at this point, we're still in a time in the ancient world where everybody's actually giving oral history. So you're passing it on to the next generation because the generations overlap.
Okay, and so that goes to my point of I thought about how blessed we are that we have the capability to look at the Bible and look at history, and it's at at our fingertips. And because otherwise, what types of things might we have fallen into and faced God's wrath for, had we not had the ability to learn and see the mistakes of our forefathers? Whereas they, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, maybe a multitude of other stories, and the people didn't have that chance. Not that it's fair or unfair, but I do think we are blessed to have that.
See, now they did actually have Lot, which was Abraham's nephew, who was living amongst them and who did tell them about God. But they chose again to not repent and instead stole themselves into fornication and a lustful lifestyle. So, and then, Stefan, this is another thing to kind of piggyback off of what you said. A lot of people will say, especially on TikTok heavy today, they'll say, hey, look, in that story, God never said, or if you look at the translation, it doesn't talk about homosexuality. It talks about, pedophilia and all those other things. But in reality, he says, starting with pedophilia and everything that is an immoral act that does not follow the original blueprint of Adam and Eve. And with that being said, anything that is opposite of heterosexual, of a man and a woman coming together to have and reproduce, is a fault. And he said, not just any fault, it's a double fault in the flesh. He doesn't say that for any other sin but this one. So when we look at homosexuality, pedophilia, rape, all these orgies, all these extra things, they're double faults in the flesh, with the homosexuality one being the main double fault. All the rest of them are regular, and I'm going to say regular sins, but they're big sins. But the double fault in the flesh is when you break the blueprint that God created, because he made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. So when you put that, just to kind of come back to what Stefan was talking about earlier, the devil takes that rainbow and he perverts it, because the rainbow was used to wipe out all the bad that was happening. When these angels came into Sodom and Gomorrah to tell the people about what they were doing and to help Lot and get them away from the city because they were going to destroy it, all the people said, hey, listen, Lot, tell them come out of your house. We want to sleep with them because they look beautiful. Lot even said, please don't do that. You guys don't realize just how much trouble that is for you to even say that. I'll give you my virgin daughters. He had 2 daughters. He said, I'll give you my virgin daughters instead. And you could rape them, do whatever you want to do with them, but do not say I'm going to sleep with these angels. And they said, no, we don't even want your virgin daughters. We're way past that. We want those angels. We want something new. That's how much lust has destroyed and consumed them. So that rainbow is a perversion on the fact that God used it to clean off all that sin that he had did before, all that sin that mankind had did before. He wiped it away and washed it and used it as a symbol, and the devil now comes back and reclaims it and says, you know what? That rainbow is going to represent the same people that God got rid of in the first place. And that's the reason
Wow.
why. That's the reason why that
Yeah.
actually becomes their symbol. It's pretty much like a mockery to God, like ha ha
Yeah.
ha.
And it's great. Like, and like, I love, you know, like, my favorite color is purple, but I love, like, it's such a beautiful thing to see a rainbow after, you know, the rain. Especially, I think a double rainbow, like, a couple of weeks ago, I was like, yo, what the? So,
Yep.
yeah, it's really cool to see.
But that's why, and you'll start to see different, like as we go through the Bible, you'll start to see different things that the devil takes that God intended for good, and now he's taking and perverting it and giving it a second meaning or a double meaning. So now when people see it, they don't associate it with God's promise. They associate rainbows with the LGBT community. Whereas this is supposed to be that whenever you see that, God is telling you that, hey, when the storm hits, you're still going to be safe no matter what. Instead, we look at it and want to run if we're heterosexuals because we're not part of that group. Chris, do you have another question?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. Just making sure. So now, moving forward. This is pretty much the ending of the story. We'll still pick back up with Noah as we're going into the next story being the Tower of Babel and what goes with his descendants afterwards. But just for the flood story, however, we have the descendants of Noah after he pretty much lives his life and is about to die. We have his sons who now repopulate the world. So Noah has 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Ham's descendants are the people who populated the northern African continent in the Middle East. Also the father of Canaan, who, as we know, this is where our main story takes place for the Hebrews. They're going to the promised land, pretty much the land that Ham and his descendants lived in. And that's where the most of the rest of the story of the Bible takes place. Shem was the father of the Hebrew people, the children of Eber, and the Oriental people. I'm going to come back to that part in a second. And from Japheth, we actually have the Caucasians who settled in Russia and the European continent. Now, it's also noted that Japheth was light-skinned. Sometimes they even say he was probably also albino like Noah. And from him, we have all the white people that we have in the world comes from him. That settled in Russia and the European continent. Now, Shem being the father of the Hebrew people that would later on become the Jews, and also the Oriental people, meaning pretty much anybody who becomes Asian, Mongolian, Hawaiian, and even some that become native. The reason why this is important is because Oriental people actually have the same backing as the Hebrew people because they all come from Shem. Now, the only reason why Asian people look Asian, and as funny as it may sound, is because of the Mongolians. The Mongolians are a family that come from the line of Japheth. And they were nomads, and they were in the northern parts, so in the kind of in the Arctic parts of Russia and on the top. And when they came and took over the Asian empires, they had such a dominant trait with their eyes, and they're very dark, and their eyes are so chinky, and their hair straight, that surprisingly, all the Oriental people after them tended to look more like them. And not only that, the Mongolians, they were such a small group, but they were very strong. They would sleep with the mother, sleep with their daughters, and sleep with their daughters' daughters as well, just to make sure that their line took over everybody in that country. So when you look at Asian people today, their eyes being that thing that we make fun of a lot, the stereotype, it's because of how they took over and made, made these people theirs. And that's one of their biggest traits that they passed on. And another thing for the Oriental people, when we look at our descendants from, Black people are always looking at this whole thing of the descendants and where we come from, this and that. But if you notice, throughout every place from Ethiopia all the way to the Middle East, India, all the way down to the Pacific islands, like not Thailand, the Philippines, going into Hawaii, and then even into Mexico, there's a certain trend amongst these people. They look more native. The Hawaiians look like island Mexicans in a sense. And don't take offense to anything that I'm saying for anybody who's listening. But in a sense, there is a common trait that kind of links everybody. But if you look at it, a lot of them are like Black people who are missing certain traits, and it still continues on. So now when you have certain islands like Melanesia, I would suggest that you guys look that up if you haven't seen it before. It's an island in the Pacific. It's an Asian island, but it's nothing but Black people that have blonde hair and blue eyes. And they're noted to not have been touched since ancient times. That's how they were when they migrated away from the Middle East. So just to show you how some of those people kind of still keep certain traits even to this day, Shem has a great diversity within his own group. Ham's group is what would become the Mediterranean people that we come to know today. So everybody who is Greek, and this is the reason why they say Greeks are not actually white, they're actually Black. But of course, history was whitewashed, and we know that. But the descendants of Ham, they were also dark and olive skin colored like Shem's descendants. And because of that, we have the Greeks and the Romans. They come from the nation of Ham. Like I said, we're going to be following through. Eventually, I'm going to make a flow chart to show all the generations and all the descendants of who became who, so we can kind of trace where different races and how the kingdoms come together. But this is what I had for the top three, and this is how the world actually starts to get settled by everybody. And then you'll see it take a major change after the Tower of Babel, which is our next Bible study. And yep, there we go. The Tower of Babel is next. That's chapter 11. This one's going to be short. So please do read this. So read ahead so we can get prepared. So by the time we come back, we can go ahead and jump right into it. Let me go ahead and, oops. All right. So before we end, do we have any other questions?
No question. Just again, great study and explaining in detail chapters 6 through 10. Really thorough and informative, like always. So yeah, great study tonight.
Great. Thank you. BJ Jamar.
I got no questions. It was a good study.
Okay.
Good study. I got no questions.
I don't have any questions. I do appreciate you. Forget that you take your time, get out here. I know you do got stuff going on. Like we all do got stuff going on in our personal lives, and we still take the time to, come here and meet. So I do appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys because trust and believe. Getting this stuff together, and I said this last time, I get nervous. Probably the last 2 hours leading up to Bible study, I am nervous every single time. Even though I know it's going to go well, I still get nervous because, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be ready for a certain question that might pop up, or do I know everything that I'm supposed to be talking about? And that's how I get. Stefan, you have something?
That was by accident.
Oh,
but it doesn't seem like that. it's real. Because like I'm a teacher, so when you're saying typo on a slide, everything's you know um well put, and you explain the questions well. People ask multiple. You delegate well. Come back to questions, and so it's great. So yeah, you can't even tell. It's everything prepared and planned out. It's nice.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I can't take all the credit. I do have somebody who is working on the presentations for me. I write the PowerPoints, and they go through and pretty much peer review it or format it so it looks pleasing. So I'm not gonna take all the credit, but for the most part, it's a team effort. I couldn't do this if you guys weren't here. So I do say thank you, and I'm gonna go ahead and pray and close it out, and then I'll see you guys next Tuesday. So close your eyes and bow your head. Lord Father God, thank you again for today. Thank you for letting us come together and have this study. Thank you for letting us have this time to, dig in and understand and go over old stories that we just thought were kid stories, and see your vision and see your hand in what you created in this big book that we call the Bible. Lord, we ask that you continue to open up our eyes whenever we come to studies, and continue to let us thirst for this knowledge every week, every Tuesday, to come and be here for you, Lord. No matter what happens, Lord, we know that you'll always be here and always present us a rainbow. No matter what storm that we go through, Lord, that you always bring us through faith. We ask that you continue to build up on our faith and continue to make us more and more every day. May your will be done, and may the blood of Jesus Christ always be on us. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Everybody have a good night. Rise up.
Thank you. Too. Rise up.
Rise up. Rise up.
Yes, sir.
Rise up. Yeah.